Hi, how you living? How you feeling? How you doing? So I'm going to talk a little bit about Bali and about how Indonesia went down, right? So I don't want to be hostile and negative, but I also don't want to be like super optimistic and just like naive. So I'm going to try to speak my truth and about like what I experienced and how I felt about being there. So there were certain things that were the expectation was that kind of upheld, not necessarily. I'm talking cost of living and like how cheap and inexpensive you would be expecting it to be. If you're like a backpacker and you have like pretty much nothing, I guess if you cut back on everything and look, you can kind of get by. I just thought that the whole island would kind of be that type of experience, which is kind of naive because looking at all the videos on YouTube and like what everybody says, that's what I was expecting. I thought paradise for like nothing, and it's not like that. It's paradise, yes, but not for nothing. It's paradise for quite a bit. If you have a lot to spend and you know you're not gonna like be trying to save anything, then of course you can go to the beach clubs, you can eat at like all the expensive places and the like, so that's totally okay. But if you're trying to save, it's not like you're gonna spend nothing, so it's not as cost effective as I was expecting. I'll kind of like just put some references about how much we spent and yeah, and how that looks, and then you can kind of make a decision for yourself about how cost effective Bali was for us and how it would be potentially for you. So overall it was a pleasant experience mostly, but there were some things that just weren't very great for me. I do not like geckos, I do not like lizards and reptiles. Obviously going to an island with that kind of preference is obviously not like the best decision, because I think the ratio of like gecko to person is basically 1 to 1. There's like 4 million people, 4 million geckos, so you bumping into a tokek is like something that's going to happen every day. Tokek was like the name of the geckos, I guess. They have like a voice, they've got a sound, you will hear them, you will feel them around, they're everywhere and it's just not pleasant at all. It is not. You just will not win. You just have to kind of be friends with them, and if you're not the reptile kind of person, that might not necessarily be very pleasant for you. We had a couple of tokeks in our Airbnb that we had to kind of chase out, and it was just a nightmare. There was just like a lot of differences in terms of plumbing. There were places where you can't flush, if that makes sense, like toilet paper down the toilet. You've got to kind of throw it somewhere else, and just yeah, which was interesting. There were a lot of places that were just very natural, so some of the the smells that you may be experiencing weren't the most pleasant in specific areas. I don't know what's up with the plumbing, but I think it is like, I mean, based on Google, they said there's open defecation and things like that, so maybe that's what was going on. But yeah, there were places like that that are not necessarily fully developed, so when you're like walking by, the sidewalk is not very pleasant, so you're not gonna get all the space for you guys to like hold hands and whatever. You're gonna kind of have to be walking behind each other or what have you, depending on where you were. They were very nice clothing stores and stuff like that, from international destinations, and like from like I guess exports to Bali. The fruits, I didn't like the taste of the fruits, if that makes sense. Like the orange juice that I had, I didn't enjoy. It was just different tasting from my perspective, and yeah, there was a lot of differences. I mean, there's some videos I'm gonna of course add about like the actual experiences of like what we saw in the hotels and stuff that weren't necessarily the most pleasant. Sometimes we couldn't even open windows, which was very weird, and the hygiene wasn't always the best. But it does depend on how much money you have and where you're booking, and of course, so some of that's on you if you haven't done your research and you haven't done your homework. And yeah, the laundry situation wasn't so great because depending on your level of like what clean is, you might not necessarily be happy with what you're getting when you get your clothes back from the laundromat or what have you. That was something. Also, service was great most of the time. There was one Vietnamese restaurant that we went to, and the lady only asked the gentleman that I was with how his meal was. Didn't really ask me, and it was not, I wasn't used to that, so I kind of asked her like, why didn't you ask me, like, what's going on? And she was like, I also meant to ask you. And I was like, okay, interesting. There was like an aura of like patriarchy, so sometimes you'd find that people just greet the male that you're with and they don't greet you out of maybe possibly respect. So that wasn't necessarily something I was used to that I liked. But in terms of like scenery, it's gorgeous when you go into the beach clubs. I loved the look and feel of like the beach clubs and how it looked and all of that. But in terms of like Gini coefficient and like the gap between the rich and the poor and like the people there, you know, there are people that don't necessarily have everything, in terms of like there are people that are not necessarily doing very well financially. So you do see that, you know, you do see like how the people that are like from there are living, as opposed to like the tourists and all of that. So it isn't very nice to kind of see that gap, but it is everywhere, you know, depending on wherever you, like, it doesn't really matter where you're at. Every place has the divide, so you're probably going to see that it doesn't matter where you go. So, but it was just interesting to see, like, when you walk into the like Zen Cafe, right? You go in and it's just like bamboo and it's just beautiful. It's a dream, and you're like, wow, breathless, whatnot. But then when you leave and you go elsewhere, you find like, you know, small sidewalks and you can't really walk. It's like kind of like squashed, lots of bikes everywhere, not a lot of cars. Like, it feels like there's like a lot of people and you're just struggling to kind of be there. There were some cultural differences, I will not lie. Some things that some person might potentially find distasteful depending on their religious standing, but that might necessarily not be so offensive if you're like from there. Like certain kinds of ornaments and statues and things they were selling everywhere on the corner. If you're like a girl's girl, you're kind of like, oh, what are they trying to sell? Or like, what's going on here? Kuta, for instance, was very interesting. I remember we were walking on the street and people tried to like sell us something dodgy, like some kind of drug or whatever, and we didn't obviously go ahead with that because that's illegal and you don't want to end up in like a prison somewhere in a, you know, foreign country. That's not something you're trying to do. So if you're like there and someone's offering you weed or offering you some kind of drug, please don't do it. Not like, just save yourself, like, because it's illegal and it's like you're playing with fire. So yeah, that was something we saw in Kuta. Also, in terms of like air quality, it's not the best. You could struggle to breathe for like the first week, but we were in Kuta initially, and for the first week or so, like, my lungs were struggling. It was really tough to breathe because of like lots of smokers and the bikes and all of the pollution coming from the bikes. So you're like, it's tough. It's really, really tough. But that's something that maybe if you do your research, you can find, you know, like where are the clear air pockets on the island, which areas are more, you know, more friendly than others. Also, there are earthquakes. There was a time we basically witnessed like a mini earthquake, which was so scary because you're sitting in like a hotel and like it shakes and the doors shake and like you're like, what's going on? So that was new and a little bit scary. So if you're very afraid of earthquakes, just be mindful that that's something that can happen on the island, as well as volcanoes are a thing potentially. So just, you know, be mindful of where you go. And yeah, there was just like a lot of differences I noticed from where I'm from. The workforce was very, very young. Like, everyone was like really, really young, which is interesting and different at the same time. Men were the cleaning people. That was different for me to see. So the guys that were cleaning your rooms and stuff were men. So like, I don't want to make like some gender unfair statement about like the level of cleanliness or whatever, but men were the ones cleaning. And yeah, so that was very, very new, very, very different. And language, so not a lot of people speak like really fluent English, so that was also interesting to see. And they have so many different languages on the island, and yeah, they really love music. There was a lot of like karaoke stuff everywhere, and people just trust the bikes. Like, you see young people, no helmets on the bikes with like multiple people, like more than 5 at a time. There's just so much to talk about. A couple things that I may have forgotten that I just wanted to touch on right now, so I will just do that. I'm gonna obviously look down because I'm making sure that I'm not forgetting anything, and it's raining. I like the rain, so hopefully it's not too distracting. Okay, so we're still talking about Bali, we're talking about Canggu, Kuta as well as Ubud, because that's where we were at typically. Those were the three different places we were basically circulating during our time there. Okay, so these are the pointers that we may have for you. So the first thing is, if you are in an area that isn't very urban, you may hear a monkey running across the roof. Pretty cool, but pretty scary as well. So just be mindful of that possibility. Regarding homeless dogs, they're everywhere. So be careful of rabies. Don't just be too friendly. I love dogs, but I wasn't too friendly because I had read a couple of articles about just, protecting yourself from any ailment that could make its way to your life. So that was something we noticed. Homeless dogs are everywhere, specifically in Canggu. I noticed so many homeless dogs in Canggu. Not as much in Ubud, but obviously Ubud was not something that was a consistent experience. So maybe I'm not aware that maybe they are. So I just saw a lot more in Canggu. All right, and then regarding phallic statues, they're everywhere. So if you're conservative, avoid Kuta and rather be situated around the woods, because you're just going to see all sorts of things that are just going to be distasteful for you potentially, and you're just going to be like irked out by it. So just be mindful of that, or just be aware of that. When ordering from Grab, if they don't have an item, this was so cool, they bring you a similar alternative and they'll write like, sorry, we didn't have ginger, so we added such and such instead. I really found that so cool. And then if you want to make sure that your room doesn't have too many tokeks or geckos, you want to keep the aircon on minimum, right? As cold as possible. They're cold blooded, so they like heat. So if you don't do that, you might find that they're like attracted to like the TV or like places that are just really hot, including like the inside of the aircon as well, which is strange, but you could find them in there. The people in Bali are super friendly, super smiley and happy, and like happy to serve. And just, there was this one time when we were in Ubud and we were leaving the hotel and we're like, oh, so sorry, we may have left a bit of a mess. We were just in a rush because we didn't want to check out late. And like the staff was so understanding, and they're like, oh, don't even worry about it, because I was apologizing for makeup in the sink, because I was like washing makeup off my face and stuff, and I think I left a little bit of makeup just like on the edges and stuff, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, no, don't worry about it, that's our job, that's what we're here for. So they were super friendly, super understanding. There's a lot of mystical statues that you like see in certain areas, and they're so captivating and enchanting. You can get mesmerized and lost in them if you just stare at them for a while. So that was a nice feature that was there all around the island. They also have their traditional offerings that they lay out. So please be kind, don't kick them around, don't stomp on them, don't move them around, just like understand that they're there and just keep it moving. And then one thing that was super different was waking up to the sound of tokeks in the morning, as opposed to like a rooster or something. You just hear tokeks in the morning and you're like, what is that? And you're like, oh, okay, I'm definitely not home right now. That was different. And then restaurant space. So this is literally only based upon the opinion of our neighbor, so please don't take this as fact, but this is something that she mentioned. And she's like, she was in the restaurant space and she couldn't get with it, because she was like, it was really, really, really difficult to like translate Western standards of customer service to the people that she was hiring that were locals. She's like, for instance, something like finding hair in soup. She says in one of her restaurants, one of her staff members accidentally left their hair in the soup or something like that, and one of the customers was really like, just grossed out by that, and kind of like raised that issue to the manager. And then the manager, who was also a local, was kind of like, it's not a big deal, like just took it out with their hand, and it was basically like, okay, now you can enjoy your soup, which was very not it. So there were a number of restaurants that we found that just you know, like you find like a dirty spoon inside the, it's like a little tray that has like a bunch of little different cutleries, like a basket tray kind of thing that you find when you walk in, and those are the cutlery items that you're going to use when you're like eating. There was a number of instances where like the spoons were dirty and you're just sifting through to find like a clean one to use. So I remember when we were talking with the neighbor about this, that's when she brought up the issue about what she was experiencing with trying to, yeah, train excellent or Western typical customer service traits into her staff, and she was struggling with that. So that's something to just be aware of. Also, according to one Uber driver, the locals drink beer to the sounds of tokeks in the distance. So he was just like, and I'm saying Uber, but it's not Uber. I believe it's like Grab actually. But nonetheless, he was saying this from the perspective of like, yeah, I was complaining about the tokeks, and I was trying to ask him how do I get rid of them in the rooms and stuff, and he was just like, just drink a beer, like have a young bintang there, and just like, you know, get used to them. And I didn't get that, but like after actually googling a little bit and realizing there's like 4 million people in Bali, give or take, and 4 million tokeks slash geckos as well, now it makes sense. And I'm just like, why, you know, from my perspective. And then also there was minimal homelessness in terms of people. I didn't notice a lot of, yeah, like I didn't notice a lot of like homelessness. I think I only noticed like one person that might have been homeless the whole time that I was that we were there. So that was interesting. There was a lot of constructions taking place, so people are of course investing in the villa space that side. So you do see that all over Bali. That's just something that's like, you know, going to miss that. And then also there were bikes everywhere. You could find so many people on a bike. It's like 4 people on one bike, and you're like, how is this safe? And because maybe you're not used to relying solely on like a bike as like your primary source of transport, so you're thinking, what's going on? But everybody else is like super chill, and it's not a big deal. They're cool with that. So yeah, there was just a lot of bikes everywhere. This, I think, was contributing to the air quality not necessarily being at the best standard, and just the difficulty breathing, specifically in Kuta, because of that, right? Because of course, the pollution that's coming from all the different bikes that are there, and like the smoking that's taking place. There was actually like a restaurant where we went, and I asked the waitress if we could sit inside because we didn't want to be in the smoker section, and she was just giving me this like confused look, and I'm like, is the smoker section inside? And she said yes. And then I was like, okay, but then is the smoker section outside? And she's like, yes. And I was like, so where are we gonna sit if y'all are smoking in and outside? So it was very interesting, but that could have been an English issue as opposed to the inside and the outside being smokers areas. So I'm not sure exactly what that was. Okay, and then there's tattoo parlors everywhere. One thing you'll notice when you're in Bali, you're either going to be offered bike, right? You're going to be offered a bike ride. You're going to be offered a tattoo situation. Someone's going to offer like to do something like that, or you're going to be offered a massage, right? It's like a massage. You have to be very careful when you're going to your massage parlors, just to make sure you're going to like a safe place. There was one Grab driver that was that was very like particular. He said, be mindful, be careful, I'll take you to the ones that you need to go to, because some of them aren't necessarily super clean, right? That's what he said. Then the workforce was mostly young people. That was very different. And yeah, that's pretty much the extras. Cool. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'm not sure I went through everything in this video, but this is what I remember off the top of my head.